Could all crash in a minute. How you doing otherwise, Roy?
Oh, doing really well. Feeling inspired, but haven't had the number of hours that I usually want to have when I sleep, which is 7.
Okay. Hey, hi everyone. This is Lou Adler. We're going live in a minute or two. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see my screen going live. So, hey, hi everyone. Again, this is Lou Adler. We are live with Roy Bellotti and Janae Casca from Smart Recruiters. It is now, just so you know, it is now 2100 GMT or 2110 GMT on May 19th. So don't stay high if it's not within an hour of that time frame, because nobody will be paying attention to you. But I want to start by having you guys go in, and when you hear this message, and I need a couple of you to put the URL of this live event as a message to me in LinkedIn. I believe I will be able to track it, but it would be good as a backup for you to give me the URL, and I will see if when I get the notification on LinkedIn. Sometimes I need some parallel processing here. But I do not. Oh, yes, we do. IMC live. We are now live, so I don't need that URL. Janae, do you get that? You see it?
Got it.
Okay, we're good. Unfortunately, I now have to do one thing that I didn't want to do, but hold on. You don't want to know what I just did, but it was amazing that I pulled it off. Actually, I was getting a feedback through my hearing aids. So when you get my age, you use hearing aids, and then all of a sudden it does multiple.
I'm glad you solved that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're good. Okay.
Nice.
As soon as we see some comments coming through, we're going to begin. But let me make this opening statement, because I know a number of you are 30 seconds behind the live event. Roy, why don't you introduce yourself real quickly, and we'll kind of get started here and the focus, and we'll go from there. And I'm starting to see, thank you very much. Well, that's Sashin. That's not the URL I wanted, but I appreciate that is the URL that you just sent in, which is a good URL. That is the URL right here in the bottom of the middle of the screen. It's where you can get our free job seeker course. With that, Roy, introduction, go for it.
Hi, I'm Roy. I work at Smart Recruiters. I look after the corporate social responsibility arm of Smart Recruiters. And over the past 3-4 months, we've been working to create job opportunities by incubating Smart Recruiters softwares with different communities around the world. We've had an initiative called Jobs for Lebanon, Jobs for Netherlands, Jobs for Ireland, Jobs for Australia. And the one we're going to talk about today is Recruiters Recruiting Recruiters, where we can help recruiters recruit recruiters. And I'm also very excited to tell you a bit more about how we're using Lou Adler's courses for the communities that we have been incubating as well. So thank you for having me.
I'm happy to have you here, Roy. So let me kind of give an introduction for the jobs for anybody. I don't care where you are, Lebanon, Netherlands, Luxembourg. There's only 4 people in Luxembourg looking for a job, I discovered yesterday, but so that's probably not on this course either. This is also, I'm practicing for my Saturday Night Live show. You probably won't find me there, but I've been practicing for 43 years and I've never been invited on, but you now know why. But I did create—
You just raise your chances.
Yeah, I did create a site it's our learning platform. So we've taken all of the content, performance-based hiring content, put it on the learning platform. You can get to it at www.winwinhiring.com. When you get there, you'll see this job seeker course. It is free. And as Sachin and a couple of people who've already taken it, it's phenomenal. And it's not because it's free that it's phenomenal, because it really works. And I'll give you a couple of tips in this program of what you have to do to get a job properly and to be interviewed accurately. So that's really the point I kind of want to make. Let me introduce the topic, get Roy's perspective and anybody else's perspective in the chat area. We have Janae Casca is our producer. She's watching the chat, trying to keep it clean. She's going to delete anything that's inappropriate. Unless it's funny and inappropriate, we'll keep that and we'll go for that. I have a philosophy. It's called win-win hiring. The idea is that by hiring for the anniversary date, meaning a year after the person starts, it's a lot better than hiring for the start date, which is the day the person starts. And the reason I'm going to make that contention here, and we're going to show it for whatever you are on this, whatever side of the desk you are, whether you're a recruiter, hiring manager, job seeker, I want to focus on things you can do to maximize your opportunity. Hire a great person or find a great job or find another job. 22 years ago, I had this cartoon drawn. 22 years ago. At the time, and this was the state of HR technology at the time, and we were promised we were going to win the war for talent because of ATS systems, job boards, new ways of making decisions, assessment tests, all this stuff would just change the world. I looked at it 22 years ago and said, not going to change. If you keep on posting boring jobs, you'll get boring people. That's actually not what I said, but I said the best people aren't going to apply to a boring job. If you make it difficult to apply and get a job and learn about the job or negotiate the salary up front, or if hiring manager recruiters can't interview properly, or if it's hard to find a job, I mean, it seems impossible to me. If you're looking for an engineering job, the system should tell you what the best engineering job is in the country rather than who promoted the advertisement first and having to dig through 373 jobs to find a good job for yourself. That to me is an inefficient process. And I said 22 years ago, if they don't change that, nothing's going to change. So Roy, you've been around for 5 or 10 years, maybe 10 years plus in this industry, and anybody else can make a comment. What's changed? We just do the wrong things faster. And I think we started the wrong thing. So that's my take. What's your take, Roy?
My take is it's gotten worse because specifically now, it's accelerated to getting worse, and this leaky bucket has gotten very leaky. The reason I say this is because when your main instrument to find a job is to go to a job board, and you're at a place and the jobs don't get cleaned up in that job board, then you have 36 million people who lost their jobs recently, among which a huge number of recruiters, then a lot of these jobs are actually on either freeze, or the person who's supposed to be behind that job looking at the candidates and intaking them and evaluating them is no longer there because they're looking for a job themselves. And therefore, you don't know which job is clean, which job is not, which one you're going to get a response to, which one it wasn't. So the leaky bucket before, where you felt like it was a wishing well, you apply and then you only hear back if you apply to at least 20 jobs, you hear back once. Now the odds are much worse. So it's gotten much leakier, is how I see it.
That's a good point. Yeah. And I'm actually going to make a statement, and that's for everybody. I know Roy has just created a new system for helping recruiters because he knows every single recruiting leader in the country. So if you're a recruiter, you got to talk to Roy. He knows every single person. On the other hand, I know not every single person in the country, but I know a couple of good recruiters. And I know the good recruiters don't apply for a job. They call up one of their former bosses and said, hey, are you looking for another recruiter? And they get a job that way. That's the same way a great engineer gets a job, a great sales rep gets a job. When they lose it, they work the network. So I want to make this kind of simple statement. But when you're an active candidate, you have no leverage whatsoever. The company's in control. So if you're an active candidate, and I think Roy would back this up, I've talked about 7 different ATSs over the last 4 years. I add up all of the applications they've managed and the number of jobs they've filled. And I got about 330 for the 4 or 5 ATSs, 340 million, and only 1%, 340,000 got jobs.
1% is what we see.
1% got jobs. And probably 3% got interviews. But if you're not an active candidate and I don't want to say passive, but if you got an introduction to a candidate or a hiring manager a different way, all of a sudden that seesaw tips over. The company, you're not the seller. The company, you're the buyer. You then have opportunities to look at different opportunities different way. And I think that's really what I call about what win-win hiring is. It's looking at the world through a different prism. By hiring for the anniversary date rather than the start date. And what I mean by that is that candidate says, I'm glad I took this job. And the hiring manager says, I'm glad I hired you. But if you focus on what you get on day one, which is a job, the title, the location, and a compensation, in fact, all of those things are negotiated before a candidate even knows the job.
Yes.
I mean, so you got all these different things. So what's your take on that concept, Roy? Just as I mentioned it here, and feel free to ad lib, and Janae, if you got a question thrown in there, feel free to respond or ask your own. And I know I like Sachin's comment. He said, I need to be on Saturday Night Live. Needs another Larry David.
I think this is not just true, but it is extremely relevant. And if you're looking at it from a perspective of a candidate, then you might think at first, what does Lou mean? I just want to get my foot through the door. I want to get that job. What do you mean hire for the anniversary date? I'm looking at it from a candidate's perspective. What that means is that when you go into an interview, first of all, present yourself in less than 60 seconds, tell your story so they can kind of get a heuristic of who you are, who's that person behind that, that face, so they can relate to you and understand kind of what kind of questions they want to ask. But one of the very first questions that you do want to ask is, why is this job up? What problem are you trying to solve? And by asking this question, you bring it back to the interviewer to tell you, well, you know what? I've got all these financial planners and I've got all these people in our call center and all these customers are coming to our website and I need to connect them, and my scheduler is breaking and I'm unable to optimize how the audience can come and meet a financial planner that fits their needs. It's an operations problem. Now, all of a sudden, you can relate it back to what you've done and you can tie back to this and you know what needs to be solved. And you're barely 3 minutes into the interview, you've gotten into the meat of it, and not because of anything outside of the fact that you've understood what it is that needs to be done right around in the first few months, so that you can kind of talk to that. And here's your perspective on how someone can be hiring for the anniversary date, because like, this person's done this before, they've done that project before, you stand out. On the employer front, it's a lot more obvious. There is an entire industry called, performance-based hiring. If you hire someone, you pay the recruiter. Well, back in the day, and Lou was one of the best in the business, Lou would give you a full refund if that person bailed out after a year, if that wasn't the right fit between the hiring manager and the candidate.
Before a year, not after a year.
Yeah. So basically, you want to be able to, in order to hire someone who's a good fit and hire for that anniversary date, you got to get that fist bump when one person's a hiring manager, the other person's the candidate, and you got to understand how they click. Is one a micromanager and the other one not?
I'm going to interrupt you, Roy, because there's a good question here from a guy who's a double-E electrical engineer. And I want to tie these pieces together.
Yeah.
And it happened a couple of weeks ago where somebody asked me on this call, one of these LinkedIn lives, said, hey, should I send you my resume? I said, I don't want your resume. Yeah. Tell me what you've accomplished, something big that forget the resume. Resume is a useless document, absolutely useless. Doesn't say anything. On the other hand, if you said the biggest project I ever worked on was this, I'd like to talk to somebody who's working on that kind of project, or you find somebody who's working on that kind of project, you're in the game. So this one,
you're in the game.
So I'm looking for an intern, Regis. I said, don't send me a resume. Send a summary of some project you worked on that would indicate you're a good engineer. So now I'm going to go to Roy's point where, what do you do in the first minute or two? And in our job seeker course, the first thing it says, if you feel you're not being interviewed accurately, ask the hiring manager, hey, can you tell me about what you need to do over the course of the first 3 months or the first year? Some of the projects, I'd like to give you some examples of work that I've done that are most related.
Exactly. Cut to the chase.
Right. It changes everything. So to me, job postings that list skills and experiences, trying to match them to resumes that have a bunch of skills, that is never going to work. You can be as AI as efficient as possible. It will not work because that's not the criteria. Let me kind of take this to another level to demonstrate the problem that I've seen, and I've seen this problem for 30, 40 years. Now, 40 years ago, I created my first, no, 30 years ago, excuse me, whew, got me nervous. 40 years ago, I created a chart that said the best candidates on the start date are rarely become the best hires a year later. Because on the start date, the only reason anybody's going to see you is because, if you apply for a job, that is because of your list of skills and experience you have on your resume. Some recruiter calls you up, and then that recruiter box checks your skills, your title. Hey, we're working in this city. Here's our company name. You okay with the location? And by the way, what's your comp? What comp do you need? And if you don't answer the question, you're excluded. And if you're too high or too low, you're excluded. So all of that stuff's negotiated before you even know the job. And then somebody meets you, either the recruiter or the hiring manager makes a judgment about your first impression. And if you screw that up, you're history. But you have to pass all of those filters to be considered a possible candidate for a job. But all that stuff is day one or before day one. It's the past.
Yes. Yes.
But if you go into the future, and I ask people this all the time, tell me about the best people you've ever hired, or the best people you've ever worked with. No, I know Roy and Janae. They are great people. I've known them for over a year. They are great people because they achieve the results they work hard, they make it happen. They don't make excuses. They get along with people. They collaborate, they mentor. They can build teams, and they get stuff done. Hey, I promise you I'll get it done by a week from Friday. They'll have it done a week by Friday. Everybody, a great hire meets all that criteria. So this is the question I've asked now probably 30 to 34,000 hiring managers, because I deal mostly with hiring managers. I ask them, who would you rather? Well, first off, I said, how well does the stuff on the left predict the stuff on the right? How well? And then I ask the question, hey, have you ever met someone who's a great performer, who has a different mix of skills, might be a little nervous in the interview, is willing to negotiate the salary? And have you ever met someone who has all of this, who doesn't turn out to be a great hire? The answer is always the same. And I'm going to contend the problem starts because we're looking for the wrong stuff. And what Roy just said in terms of when you get in for the interview, and what this candidate said about submitting his resume, you can't focus on the stuff on the left. You got to focus on the stuff on the right. That's where the decisions are made. Roy, take on that one. And I know, Renee, Janae, you're looking through some questions. Anything pop up that makes sense, Janae?
Yeah, I actually have a question about this. Would you say a good tip then is, as you're building your resume, to look at this right-hand column that has for the different things, achievables underneath the great hire column, and make sure that your resume aligns to some of those things? Like when someone looks at your resume, are they seeing how you have achieved results, how you've exceeded expectations and taken responsibility? Like, would you say that that's something that would be helpful for a job seeker right now?
Yeah, here's what I would say, and I think it's a great point. When I look at a resume, and let's just go through the reading of a resume. When someone looks at a resume, they don't look at your name and title. They might look at your academic background. They look at your titles. They look at the rough progression. So it's the headlines. This person's got 5 or 6 years with some good companies. Then they look at 1 or 2 major accomplishments in that. So to me, that's the way it should be structured. But I think even to get in the game, there's too much of a hunger, because we're particularly now in these economic times, it's hard to, people want to get back into payroll, but in general, what I think we should do is create a couple of accomplishments, try to engage in a conversation with someone, say, here's the kind of work that I've done, would love to chat with you about it, and let them figure out if they have a job that makes most sense. But trying to force fit a job based on skills and experience to your skill set and likelihood that you actually find it and get interviewed, that's a pretty remote situation. Roy, what's your take on all this stuff? Let me give you the headline here to lead.
I think the most important question anyone can ever ask for almost anything is why. So in here, why applies very well. Why is this job open? What problem are you trying to solve? And this will immediately take you to the heart or the meat of it. And then you can start to tie out what it is that the person is trying to do, the challenge that they're trying to do, with something that you have done. If you look at it from that lens, and then you look at the 3 items on the left and the 3 items on the right, you'll realize that very quickly you only get into the 3 things on the right. First impression, gone, because right now we're talking about a problem that I'm trying to solve. Doesn't matter to me what you look like right now. I'm actually in my head trying to solve that problem and trying to solve it together. We're actually looking more at performance. What have you done and how would you solve it? Interview screen, basic wants, gone. Because right now I'm actually looking at what are the skills that you can bring in order to solve that problem, how you've worked with different teams to make that happen, how you have been managed or how you have managed people in the past. So this why question, why is this job open, is very valuable to not just, it's hard to make it appear on the resume, even though Janae's point makes a lot of sense, because you have to have a resume anyways until we can do without it. But when you send a message to someone to tell them, hey, I see that this is in this job, if you can try to suss out what the problem is, the faster you can get to it in your creative oral expression or written expression, the better. And then the sooner, once you're in an interview, it's your space to be able to move the conversation to everything that's on the right, so that you can be going for, the performance for the 1 year anniversary, hire for the 1 year anniversary rather than for the start date.
Well, I think your point about asking the why question is great. Why is this job available? What is it? I'll call it the what, the why, and what is the person going to be doing? And you've already, what Roy just said is you've taken it away. Let's assume your first impression is not perfect or you're a little bit nervous. By asking the question, you take the pressure off you, the candidate, and you put it on the interviewer. And now what's going to happen if the interviewer doesn't know the job, like a recruiter frequently doesn't, they just all of a sudden, they're kind of stumbling through it. So you now taking control, and they're the ones that get nervous. But assuming the hiring manager typically knows the job, they're going to say, wow, that's a great question. They might not say it out loud, but they're going to say, whoa, this is a candidate doesn't ask that question. You got to be pretty assertive to ask that kind of question. And you can do that whether you're a quiet person or not. And sometimes if you're real friendly and affable, you're never going to ask that question. But that's a great question. I think Roy has made a great point on that. Now, the problem happens, though, is steps 1 and 2 on the left, you're going to get screened out before you can get an interview. So you have to bypass the typical employment screen. And if you apply for a job, it isn't going to happen. So I always say, if you see a job posting, if you see it, do not apply. Even if you're perfect, do not apply, because you will be considered too active and people will try to screen you out. On the other hand, if you can look on LinkedIn, obviously everyone's watching this on LinkedIn, you can look at the name of the company, the name of the department head, and you'll likely be able to find someone in that company who is the head of that department, and then send a little summary. Hey, I saw you looking for an engineer to do A, B, and C. Well, I have a background in doing that. My biggest accomplishment doing that was such and such. Would like to talk to somebody about that. You have to figure out how to get that job interview through the back door. But I think the point that Roy made is, what's your take on that one, Roy?
That's exactly it. This job that I mentioned earlier about, the operations job that I mentioned is a real job. I walked up to the office, went up the elevator, saw the office assistant, told them, hi, my name is Roy. I see you have a product and operations job open. Here's my resume. I'd love to talk to someone about it.
Interesting. So you just walked in the office to get it? And
I got that turned into, yeah. I just walked up and she looked at me dumbfounded, and she's like, you have an appointment? I said, no. Did you come off the street? I was like, well, technically, yes. But I've read the job description. I can do the whole thing. And here's my resume. Can I speak to someone about it? And so it so happened that the lady standing behind her was a chief operating officer. She said, hi, I'll talk to you for 10 minutes.
Wow.
So we sat in there and I told her, look, this is my story in 30, 40 seconds. So you know who I am. Why is this job open? What problem are you trying to solve? It was a 10-minute interview. So within minute number 2, she told me what I told you. And I told her, well, this is a problem of combinatorics. And this is how you solve it. And she said, hold on a second. Left the room. The actual hiring manager came in. And then that hiring manager left the room. Another one came in. And I had 6 interviews that day. They're like, the next day, the CEO wants to meet you. I met the CEO and I got an offer, negotiated the offer, and then started the very next day.
Well, that's actually, you went through the front door, but you didn't go through the apply button, which is still pretty good. And that reminds me of another story.
To be honest with him, I applied and then I walked up. This way, I'm in their database, and they're not like you're completely sidestepping the process. But my approach is I apply and then I go to look at who I know on LinkedIn, who's connected there, so that I can kind of have this conversation, or I just show up front door.
Yeah. Well, here's something from many, many years ago. It was a client that I had, one of the clients who I actually was my big client who I presented this chart to, was a president of a company in Southern California, plastics injection molding. And I just had, the guy was a good friend. I just asked him, how'd you get your first job? He was an intern. He went to an apprentice school, learned how to make plastic molding tools, couldn't get a job, whatever, the industry was down. So he found the biggest company in Southern California that did there. He sat in the front, he sat in the parking lot of the president's car spot. It was right there, reserved for the president. He sat there. President came in, pulled in, ignored him for 3 days. 3 days in a row, the guy was there. The fourth day says, "Why are you sitting here?" He said, "I'm waiting to talk to you." He said, "Well, come on in and I'll talk to you." And he had all his tools in him, and he went out in the factory and he said, "What do you think of this tool?" It was a piece of plastic. It was an injection molding part, which is a big piece of metal part. Don't need to get into details of it. And he said, "Well, I wouldn't have built it this way. I'd have done this, this, and this." And he said, "You're hired. Let's go do that." So it's not the same, but it's kind of the same. If you just follow the rules of everybody else, you're just going to be 1 in 100, 1%. If you do what Roy did or what this other guy did, and there's a lot of creative things you can do. The big one is don't apply. Roy, any other stories or any thoughts?
Oh, this is not just a one-off thing. I have a friend who was looking for work and she wanted to be a recruiter. I told her, just show up to these offices and then just present yourself nicely. And then you're doing half the job, because as a recruiter, you do want to be assertive. So you're showing, show, don't tell, and you're doing it in a creative way. This person who was sitting in the parking lot showed hustle, showed determination. And if that company president, for sure, their top priority is, are people motivated? Do I have the right people in here? Who do I need to hire that's motivated? Sometimes they go into the office, they're like, damn, they go back home and they're like, everybody's a slacker. We need more motive, more driven people. But then you have this person in their parking lot right now showing crazy grit. Well, that answers what's in their mind. And this is performance after one year.
That's all the stuff on the right.
That's all the stuff on the right. So you can communicate everything on the right: performance, team skills, management, not just team skills, I would say team skills, but also personal skills that you actually have, such as grit and determination and attributes. These are things that are all on the right, and then you can show them in a blend of ways.
Good point. Let me this is a story where I think everyone can do if you don't want to physically get the physical involvement. This had to be about 7 or 8 years ago. So I'm going to say 2015, 2014. There was a fellow who I didn't even realize he was an MBA student, was an Italian, but his English was perfect because I never really spoke to him. Maybe I spoke to him on the phone once. He had his MBA, he was trying to get a job in marketing at one of the big telecommunications companies in Europe. And nobody was interviewing him, whatever it was. And I just said, "What are you really good at?" He said, "I'm really good at market research." So I said, "Why don't you do a little bit of market research for the big telecom companies, competitive analysis, company A, company B, company C, and look at their features for one of their big product lines and just do a quick product line summary like you do for an MBA, and then send it off to the VP of marketing and say, 'Hey, I just done a product competitive analysis and I can understand where your products are great and where you're weak, and I'd love to chat with you.'" He calls me up, or he sent me an email. I said, "Lou, I sent it 4 companies, got 3 interviews." And then he told me I got a second interview coming up next week, and I never heard from him again in 5 years. So, but I suspect he got the job. But it's the same kind of thing as demonstrate the stuff on the right. Don't be seduced by thinking you're pushing the apply button. You're making something happen. Doing this stuff on the left is ineffective for screening. And if you get sucked into that hole, it's where you wind up being. And don't hey, I applied for 1,000 jobs. Fine. It's a waste of time. Do one of these 2 things for 2 or 3 companies and you'll get a better job.
Absolutely. And I think that showing initiative, I think that's the underlying theme of this is it's showing initiative and how can you prove your value before you're hired. So that way, it's a whole lot easier to see someone in a role when you're already thinking of ways that you're going to be of service when you're there.
I'd like to illustrate Janae's point. Lou, can I share my screen?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Let me tell you about the story of Nina. Nina is from Jordan. She wants to work at Airbnb. Her experience on her resume, who knows the university there in Jordan? Who knows the companies in Jordan? It's hard for her to break through. So when she moved to San Francisco, she started to apply to company after company after company after company after company, and then realized that was going nowhere, and she realized she needed to do something different. She's applying to be a digital marketer at Airbnb. So she put together this website, Talk About Value. First here, you learn about Airbnb, what's missing. She comes from Jordan, so she knows the market well. Why this matters, why we can expand we now all of a sudden are at Airbnb to these different markets, where you can start, all that research. What is the key? Can Airbnb move into Dubai today? Because that is the key. Yes. Who can you partner with? How can you get launched? How can you partner in these regional events? Why am I doing this? Because I'm in love with you all. Talk about value. Why do I love you all? Talk about the story. So what happened? I'll leave the ending till the end, but the story itself is fantastic.
You didn't marry this girl, did you, Roy?
Marry, no. So, but we talk a lot. We're friends. So Nina reached out to Brian. So this video went viral. The Queen Noor of Jordan tweeted at Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, to tell her, have you seen this? Chesky tweets at Nina, and Twitter goes ablaze. So she's not just done this research, to Janae's point, shown value already, and determination and grit and everything, and research, the skills, but she's also literally launched a viral campaign while applying to be a digital marketer, where Nirvana is, can you launch a viral campaign? And she's done it in the application. She's shown what she can do at the end of year one on the job, not on day one of the job.
Yeah, let me and I know somebody mentioned here about the hiring manager, and this is the issue. What I do as a recruiter is, and I've done this from the first search assignment I ever had, which was 40 years ago. Now, my background before I became a recruiter was in manufacturing, so it was relatively easy for me to do this, and I knew some presidents of companies. But when I look at a typical job description on Indeed, Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, they're not naturally job descriptions. They list skills, experience, competencies, and academic requirements. When a hiring manager says they're looking for someone and they describe it that way, I want someone with 10 years experience, this level of skills and these competencies and this academics, I basically say that is not a job description. That is a person description. Yes. A person has skills, a job doesn't have skills. So I ask the question, what does the person need to do to be successful? This is me as a recruiter taking an assignment. It's pretty much what Roy just said going in there. What are you looking for? What does a person need to do? And every single job in the world can be defined by 5 or 6 performance objectives. I focus on what person needs to do, not what they need to have. Build a team of accountants to launch an international reporting system. Put together a marketing plan to have Airbnb go into the Middle East or into Dubai. Upgrade our AI system to produce business intelligence for a new dashboard using Tableau and SQL. They do stuff. But if you can understand what that stuff is as a recruiter and or as a hiring manager, you're in the game. And when you think about the logic of it, you can have all the skills in the world. But if that doesn't mean you can do the work. But if you can do the work, it means you have all the skills. And it's kind of, when you think about it, the skills are the variable in this whole thing. The job itself drives the skills you need, and some people need more skills, some people need less skills. A diverse candidate has a different mix of skills and experience. So from my perspective, the key thing in all of this activity is to define the work that a person needs to do over the course of the first year to get a win-win hiring. If you're a candidate, you have to determine it. If you're a recruiter, you have to determine it. And if you're a top performer, you won't take a job unless you can see it. So to me, that's really the issue. And it took me a long time to come up with this simple phrase, 10 years. I mean, it sounds so simple. It's what people do with what they have that makes them successful, not what they have. It took me 10 years of doing this to realize, that's pretty simple. It's what you do with what you have. But if you don't know what a person needs to do, the likelihood of that person being successful is remote. And if you can prove it by the story of Nina, I think that was her name, the story of Roy, the story of Dave, the guy, the Italian fellow, Antonio, it's, hey, I can show you I can do the work. The resume doesn't show you if you can do the work. So don't ever send anybody a resume. Send them something that demonstrates what you can do as a person and engage in a conversation, and then start asking the why question. And pretty soon you'll have 2 or 3 interviews. The president will come in, they'll refer you to somebody else. It's a different game, but it's the right game. Let's kind of end it with a quick summary and a question or two. What do you think, Roy? Any new ideas come to mind?
That sounds perfect.
Huh?
No, I think that's great. That's great. That's absolutely great.
There was a question that came in that I think we should discuss quick. The question was, so I've asked the why question as to why is this position open right now? And the answer that was received was that the person before you left. And that doesn't really address the question. What is
why did that person leave?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you have to get to the point where you can really cut to the meat of the matter. And that goes on both perspectives, the candidate and a hiring manager or a recruiter. If you are a recruiter, you're doing yourself a disservice by having this blue box, blue circle underneath, because you're just out of touch, because you're going to get a bunch of resumes. You're still not in touch with the person. It's the green box circle above that will put your proper problem and allow people to respond to your problem, allow you to evaluate if this is the kind of person that you want, or to get much deeper than that. And this goes to both ways. On the candidate front as well, if you ask that question and a recruiter gives you because the other person quit, well, first of all, it kind of tells you that the hiring manager or the recruiter didn't answer the question. And so I'd ask, okay, but what problem are you trying to solve with that job? And if you really can't get through with the recruiter, then that tells you something about the recruiter.
Yeah, and I think it's two things. I think the why question of why is the position available? I think the what question, what do you want the person to do? And then say, why did the person leave? That would give you all the clues.
Yeah.
If you don't know what, maybe the person got fired, maybe the person was an idiot, maybe the person got promoted. Irrespective of that, if you don't know what the person needs to do and why it's open, and you could just say that, why is it open? What's the person going to do? And you kind of tie those together. I think you're in the game. Let me any questions there? I know somebody said, I'm going to go back to the top here, guys. So I just want to make sure that, so I can leave the contact information there. So let me just put this up. Any last comments here, Janae, or questions that we should handle? I think we're finding a few. I know Lori, I don't know if there's a transcript, but somebody could probably, I guess you could, somebody said her son was deaf and he would like to get this information. I think you could probably listen to it because it's definitely going to be live. You can listen to it 20 times, then you can put it through your voice recorder on Word and it might type it out somewhat. So that's the only way I think
you can do it via YouTube. There are ways where if you have access to a video, upload it on YouTube, or there are transcription services. So there's AVA, Audio Visual Accessibility. You can download the app, AVA. And the website is ava.me, ava.me. Where it will live transcribe everything that's being said for you.
Good.
And so if there's multiple people in a conversation and you want to be able to know who's saying what, that's literally what Ava does. So check out ava.me, play that video, and then let it live transcribe it for your son.
Okay. Yeah, I know this one, Trax sends a question, which Trax, you got to listen to the beginning of this whole thing from what we said. Please, I need an internship replacement. That's not a good word to use. Begging will not get you a job. Proving that you're an important project manager will get you a job. So I would say, hey, I'm looking for an internship job. If you have a complex project that involves this, this, and this, and trying to bring cross-functional collaboration to do product requirements documents together, I'd love to chat with you because here's something I've accomplished that's most related. Please, I need a job. Being desperate put you on the bottom of the heap. It doesn't put you at the top of the heap. Roy won't say that. I will say that. Describe what you can do in terms of your performance. Show some initiative. Describe what you've accomplished. Prove it yourself that you've done it, and then ask for an opportunity to at least chat with you in some unique way. Any other last questions there, Janae?
I'm not seeing any other questions that are coming in, but the one thing I wanted to mention about that is like utilizing, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, utilizing your LinkedIn network and posting things on there as well. Like being active on LinkedIn increases your personal brand. And so that way, when someone looks at your profile, they can see things that you've posted and commented on before too. And as long as they're aligned with your personal brand, that does help you.
That's a great point. In fact, that's all the stories, biggest project management, the biggest project you've worked on, put a little video together summarizing it. Yes. Put it on your personal profile, put a summary of that together. And recruiters start searching on those terms. So if you have it, there's a higher probability you'll be noticed. That's a great point today. Roy, final comments at all?
Last comment I would make is just like in any sales situation, the less you speak, the more you sell. The more the recruiter speaks, the more they buy. So if you turn the question over to them and make them talk about the problem that they are trying to solve, they're going to start to like to hear the sound of their voice, and they're going to start to convince themselves. So even if you end up with, let's say in a 30-minute interview, talk time of 15 minutes instead of 22 minutes, you're more likely to close the interview with those 15 minutes if they are deep and the other person is actually diving straight into the heart of the matter. They're going to walk away being like, maybe I didn't probe enough, but this person really got that job. And I don't see why this person wouldn't be a good fit. I can't see why it was a great conversation. Let's move forward. I don't see why not. They convince themselves. So keep that in mind. It's not about filling time. It's about making space and diving into the matter.
I think that's a great point. So I've debriefed in my 40 years of recruiting, debriefed probably over 1,000 hiring managers, maybe even way more than that. And I'm going to say 5,000 to 7,000 interviews I set up. So I've always talked to the hiring manager after that. And Roy's point is well taken. I said, why did you like this person? And they said, number one, they asked me great questions that were insightful, not self-serving, not what's the money, what's the benefit, but insightful. What's this job? What's the challenges? And they had great answers that described the work that you'd done. And when I said, what do you mean about that work? He said, they don't remember all the details, but they remember, oh, that person handled a project. I remember that. There was an overseas project. Oh, yeah. And I remember that they had a team of this person and this person. So they kind of remember the title of the project, then all the details come out. They also remember the fact that you asked good questions. And I said, well, this is a good person. And they enjoyed the conversation because it was back and forth. And I know somebody said, is ageism important? So I have this little thing over in this side picture here. It says Littler validated. The idea that I have with performance-based hiring is if you can do the work and are motivated to do it in the recent past, then that's critical. If you're competent to do the work and motivated to do the work, you're fully competent. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, what color you are, what sex you are, preference you are. It doesn't matter. If you can do the work, you deserve the job. But you have to define the job. Now, if you are competent to do the work but haven't done it in 10 years, that's not really, then you're no longer motivated to do it, so you can't prove it. But if you've done this work recently in a recent past and you're good at it, you deserve an opportunity and you just have to prove it somehow. And I think you can prove it via an example. So my statement is take this class. It's free. Go to the winwinhiring.com website. You can see the link there. Sign up for the class. Also sign up for the middle one, which is also free, which says if you're a hiring manager, here's the role that you play in interviewing and recruiting top-tier talent. As far as I'm concerned, you do those things from the candidate side, you will get a better job. And if you hire people based on what they've done, the stuff on the right, based on their performance, you will hire better people. Bye, everybody. Thank you very much, Roy. Thank you, Janae. See you next time at the Lou Adler Almost Daily Recruiting Show.
That was fun.